Welcome to this session on IGCSE Computer Science. This is Topic 8, Programming Concepts, Lesson 3, Part 2. Now, if you don't have access to these Google Slides, you can drop me a message underneath this video. What we are going to be exploring today is how we can work with two-dimensional lists. Now, this REPL program, which we are working with today, this is the complete code which you need for this lesson. I'm going to be taking different elements of this code over to a new REPL window so we can explore how we can work with two-dimensional lists. Now, the first thing which we are going to be having a look at is how can we output the entire content of a two-dimensional list and get the for loop to end once it's output the last piece of data. The next thing we are going to be having a look at is how can we identify, let's say, a biggest number or a smallest number in a two-dimensional list, and then output that number and save it against a variable. And then lastly, we are going to be having a look at how we can mimic or copy the way that a login information program or user credential program might work. So what I mean is, if we log into, let's say, Google, how would Google check to see if an email address exists? And then if the email address does exist, how would we then be able to enter a password and compare it against the username which has been saved? Now, the way that this program is going to work for passwords and also usernames, it isn't perfect, but the whole aim of this is to explore nested while loops and also nested if statements. Now, to start with, what I am going to do is I'm going to copy across this section of code to our new REPL window, and I'm going to paste it over here. Now, first of all, we have got a two-dimensional list set up. We can see that because we've got two sets of square brackets at the beginning. So we're working with a list which is called student marks. Our outer list has got two pieces of data, so we can see these square brackets here. Our second list, or our second inner list, has got two pieces of data again. And then our third inner list has got two pieces of data again. Please remember that lists start at 0 in Python and not at 1. So when I'm saying item number 1, that's going to be index 0. Now, what we have here is we have got a nested for loop, and the best way to access the outer list, so index 0, and then access the elements inside, is to use a nested for loop. So we have got for list 1 in student marks, that allows us to look at each of the outer lists, and then we've got for data elements in list 1, and this for loop allows us to look at each piece of data inside each of the lists which we have got set up here. So in other words, our inner list. Now, the idea of this program is for us to output all of the data in all of the inner lists and then stop the program. So in other words, it will stop running this code here. So we've got for print, our print data element is end equal to speech marks, and this is going to allow for the loop to end and then see our contents of a list being output on the console window in the right-hand side. So I'm going to run, and we're going to see all of the pieces of data have been output. There's no spacing here, so we've kind of stripped out that spacing, but it has allowed us to access each of the lists, output the information, and then display it in this console window. So if you have been asked to output the entire content of a two-dimensional list, this is one of the ways that you can do that. Now, the next concept we are going to be looking at is how can we write a program to identify the biggest number in a list. Now, what I'm going to do is just copy this code over. Ooh, I want to undo that, okay, because I don't want to delete my list. And I'm going to paste this information over here now. Now, the way this program is going to work, we're still going to be using our student mark list, but we have set up a variable at the beginning of this program now, which is called maximum marks. Now, this is a variable, not a constant. We have assigned the value 0 to this variable. Now, we're going to use that same nested loop structure again, but what we are going to do is when we are inside each of those inner lists and looking at index 0, index 1, index 0, index 1, we're going to compare this number against the variable. And if this number is bigger than maximum marks, which is 0 at the beginning, we are going to swap out maximum marks, which is 0, for the piece of data which is in the list. And this concept is going to allow us to output the biggest number. So we can see 99 has been output here. Now let's think about how would you identify the smallest number in the list. Now this concept isn't complicated. There are a couple of different things which we would have to change. First of all, let's think about our naming convention. So I'm going to say minimum, so I can spell this morning, minimum marks is now set to 0, and we're going to need to change this one again as well. So we're going to say minimum marks, and this also has to change as well as the print statement at the end. If you are as inefficient as me, you're going to do it this way, otherwise do a Control F and replace. We're going to run this code. We're not quite done, but we're going to see what happens. We still got 99. There are another couple of things that we need to change. So first of all, we're looking for the smallest number, so this should be a less than symbol. Can we see the smallest number? No, we can't. It's 0. So the last thing that we have to change here is this value here. So if we're looking to find the minimum number, 0 is currently the smallest number, which is why minimum marks is not changing. So we will need to output the biggest number in the list. So I'm now going to change this to, let's say, 100. If I run this code again, it's going to allow us to identify that 11 is the smallest number in the two-dimensional list. So these are the things that we would have to change. We would have to know the biggest number in the list in order for us to get this program to work. But hopefully this concept is relatively straightforward. Now, the last couple of things we're going to be having a look at here is how can we write a program that would check for a username. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this code down here, and we're going to keep copying all the way down, I think, to this section here. Let's copy and paste this over. Let's get rid of this old code and paste this up. Now, first of all, have I missed anything when I've been copying the information over? Let's just run the program and test. What's your username? Enter it in the format of user plus number. So I'm going to enter Rob11. Enter the username. I'm going to enter Bob12. And it's going to say enter the password, Bob12. And it looks like that has been accepted. Okay. Can we log in? Again, I'm going to enter Bobby this time. Now, it's going to say username not accepted. Now, why has this username not been accepted? It's because Bobby isn't inside this list. Now that we know the code is working, let's actually explore what this code is actually doing. So first of all, this time around, we are working with our one-dimensional list. So we've got student accounts, and then we've got user 1, Harry, Spurs, user 2, Jeremy, and Grandma. And we're printing out this information at the beginning, which we can see up here in our console. And then we're also printing out each individual element in a list as well. Now, just so you can understand kind of, what I mean there, I am going to run this code again. And what we can see is this print statement, so student account 0 has printed out user 1, which is the first piece of data in the list. And then this little funky print statement down here, we've done student accounts, print index 0, square brackets, and square brackets, index 0 again. Now what this concept allows us to do is print out the first piece of data, and then the first character in index 0, so that is U. If I was to change this number to be, let's say, 2, it should be printing out U-S-E. That's what we should be seeing when we run this code again. So it's allowing us to output both the index, first piece of data, and then the actual letter. So this is a particularly important concept and a helpful concept if you are learning how to work with variables and output different characters at different index positions in a list. Now, the next thing, we have got a program set up which is saying, what is your user number, and enter it in this format. We're appending it into the list, so this isn't new for you. You should know how append works. We're also asking for a password. Not sure it's really relevant to what we're doing now, but we're going to leave the code there. And then we get down to this login username program. So we're saying enter your username against this variable. And we've set up a Boolean variable. So we said entry is equal to false. Now, we've got our first while loop, which is while entry is equal to false. So we know it's false because we said it's false on line 16, so this loop is going to run indefinitely. And then what we're saying here, and we're focusing on login username at the moment, we're saying if login username in student accounts is there, so this is a linear search, we're going to say username accepted, set entry to true, and our while loop will end. So let's enter some random data, and let's enter a username, Terry, not sure if Terry's in there, enter a random password, and now we're saying please enter Terry. Let's see if it exists in the list using that linear search. Press enter. If it's in the list, it will end the program, which it has, and it says username accepted. So that's what this first if statement is doing. Now, if we run this code again, let's enter some random information here, and here it's saying enter your login information. If the piece of data is not in that 1D list, it's going to skip to this else statement, and it's going to say username is not accepted. And then it's going to set the Boolean variable back to false, and that loop will continue. So I'm going to enter Jasmine. Let's do it in a console window, not the code, otherwise it will error. Jasmine, 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 and then it's just repeating that. Let's do Harry, and then we can see the program has ended. Now, let's have a look at how this works in kind of like real life before we move on to the nested while loop. So, hopefully I've got no credentials saved here. I might have, which could be a problem. Let's just go to Microsoft login, and let's do this one here. So, do you want to log into Microsoft? Let's see. Let's sign in. Now, over here, if we enter an email, which like maybe doesn't exist inside Microsoft, like this, the login part of the program is not going to allow us to continue. It shouldn't ask us for our password if the email is not in their database. So if I press enter, let's hope this is a fake email, it's going to say this doesn't exist, which is the correct thing here, right? If we enter an email address that does exist, it should then take us on to the password section of the program. And that's the concept we're going to explore now. So let's go back over to this code. And what I am going to do is I am going to copy this code, I think, all the way to the bottom now. We should be good to go. I think I can probably get rid of everything in this window here to make it nice and clear. And then we have got this code which has been copied across. Now, what I am going to do is just run the code. Let's just see if it works first of all. And it's saying enter your login. Okay, good. So enter login, we've got login and password here. I'm going to enter something random, John1. Okay, enter password, random, saying username not accepted. Now, as I said, this program is not perfect, right? What should happen here, and this is how you can amend it, it should say username not accepted before we get to the password prompt, but we can see theoretically the program works. Now, this nesting down here, we've got while entry u is equal to false. We're going to do a linear search on the username in that 1D list, and we're going to say username has been accepted if it is inside this list here. And then if it's been accepted, we're then going to move on to this nested while loop, and it's going to say while entry p is equal to false, Boolean variable again. If username password in student accounts, print you've been accepted to the system. So if we take two pieces of data, which we can see in this 1D list, we're going to say Harry, okay, username accepted. We're now going to say enter your passwords. We're going to say grandma. And if grandma's in that list, we're going to be given access to Outlook or that computer system. But remember, I'm just modeling a concept here. Real username and password programs wouldn't be using a one-dimensional list with everything in one list, because that isn't how security protocols are kind of set up. But for the purposes of exploring how nested while loops work here, obviously you can see that this concept does work. Now, this is the end of our video. I'm hoping that when you look at this code and you look at the concept of a nested while loop and a nested if statement, that you can see how this is working. Do kind of chat to me or drop me a message underneath this video if you're not one of my students, if you want to get a better understanding of nested while loops and also nested if statements. And I look forward to seeing you in lesson 4, where we look at variable validation really, really soon.